Alrighty. So we're live now. Ken, thank you for doing this. I really appreciate your time.
Trevor, it's great to join you.
You are live from Calgary, Alberta, or just west of the city, from what I understand.
That's correct. Just outside the city. We moved out here 2012, and great biking in this area, and of course, really quick to the mountains.
Absolutely. You've probably spent most of your life outside, so being close to the mountains is one of the most important things for you.
No question.
So nowadays, you have two sons on the national team, from what I understand, Eric and Jeff. You are obviously a World Cup champion skier. You were on the national team in the Olympics. You were CEO of Alpine Canada. So how do you spend your time nowadays?
Well, these days, still there's plenty of things to be involved in, and that's I guess I'm close to formal retirement age, but it's a testament to the fact that people value experience. People value, especially those that have the time and are willing to still, roll up their sleeves and get involved. So I do have a company, a consulting company, but I can pick and choose whether I want to take on a project. So that's that I'm at that stage in life where I can be picky. But I'm involved in a lot of different volunteer and where I contribute my time pro bono. So the volunteer side, which is mostly into the International Ski Federation as a technical delegate, and I am quite involved with the youth committee and on the Alpine Executive Board. And then on the other side, where I'll be ready to just, if somebody needs help at a race, I'll jump in my car and go out and help side slip or do whatever needs to be done with it. Because we all know running ski racing is a community effort, and those people like me who can be available and very flexible are always very welcome.
Absolutely. Hard to find people with that much experience. Probably a little overqualified at times, I would imagine.
Never overqualified, and always learning, and especially when it comes to things like safety and course surfaces and stuff like that. It's constantly changing. So yeah. I actually I'm one that I go in and I make sure that ears are open, heart is open, and you listen, and in fact, one of the things that ski racing teaches you is that coaches give you direction, and I follow directions well, which my wife definitely knows that I do.
Yeah, I would imagine you got to take feedback even at this stage of life. So yeah. You have, like I said, two sons on the national team, I believe. So how much time does that involve from you nowadays? Are you kind of hands off, or what's that like?
Well, my approach, it's a good question, Trevor. It's my approach, parents, ski racing, there's clearly parents are going to be involved all the way along, because running clubs, running races, especially at the fundamental level of U12, U14, which are, of course, all the age categories. The only reason they happen is because parents are involved, and parents help. They run clubs. They are doing all the fundraising. They're making sure that the programs are ready. And then, fortunately, we have a pretty well-defined coaching system with professional coaches that make sure they're guided well. That's one of the great things about alpine skiing. But as you progress up, one of the things I did learn, and this comes from experience of being an athlete, that the relationship between the coach and the athlete is extremely important. Mm-hmm. And that's the primary one. That the athlete and coach have to know, and the athlete has to trust the coach. And what you don't want to have happen is someone who's not there all the time. And the parent, you get to a point where the parent can't be there all the time, especially as you move beyond the club. And so that's where you have to have trust in that relationship and let the coach and the athlete build their relationship. And so the role of the parent shifts to be supportive, be there. Sometimes it's driving to the airport, sometimes it's a pickup, sometimes it's helping at races, NORAM races, even World Cup races. But making sure that you confine your responsibilities of what you do to being supportive, not intrusive. So when it comes to things happening on the hill, I have that's the domain of the coaches. The coaches are, and I trust the coaches that my kids work with, and I don't have any comment unless they come in and have a very, very, very specific question, which they do from time to time. But I keep it at that. and where I can be helpful in so many other ways. And that's the same for any parent. You can go out and help at races. You are there providing logistic support. As you get up, there are other things come into play, which is helping them with their social media, communications, contracts. If they have a relationship with a ski supplier, you can provide advice in that end, because that's not so easy to find. And so I've confined myself to that, and that's plenty enough. And in that respect, you're being supportive and not intrusive, and not creating any sort of situation where the worst is for an athlete is where they're sitting here going, who do I listen to? You never want to be in that situation. So that's again the job for the parent is to support the coach-athlete relationship.
Sometimes it sounds like it's more what you don't do versus what you are doing. You don't want to be the crazy hockey parent or something like that.
Yeah. And you know, and the good thing is you do run into people that get overly enthusiastic.
Yeah.
Experience becomes a big part of that, because certainly when you go through with your first child, there's no question that you're often anxious, and you often feel, well, this is an important year. And fortunately, with experience, and I've had from time to time people that have shared experiences saying, just relax, it'll work out. Because if the athletes because they have to have if they have the talent, and if they have the will, and if they're guided well, they'll get there and they'll succeed. And you just have to trust the system and work to make the system as strong as possible.
Right. So you have two sons in the national team. You were a World Cup champion. I believe your wife was a really good athlete and skier. Do you guys ever just line up at the top of the hill and do a sort of dummy downhill to see the first to the bottom? Does he sort of race like that?
Never.
Do you have a bet on who might win that race?
Oh, we know who would win that race, but
yeah.
No, it's we just to give you a brief background. Yes, my wife Linda, she was a member of the national ski team as well. That's obviously where we have mutual shared passion, and her family and my family are very similar. That her parents were skiers and ski racers, as were mine. And I do have one other son, Kevin. He got up to the Alberta ski team level. And
so really good.
Raced NCAA for Dartmouth for a couple of years. He is now very supportive of his brothers, but he's now in the working world and very focused on his job. But for us, there's a mutual passion for skiing. And so the things we love to, and the outdoors. And so it's not uncommon that when we are able to be together, to be able to go out and jump on a pair of skis and just go ski.
There's no race to the bottom.
No race to the bottom, because usually, they get that all the time. And so usually for them, it's, they like to go explore. So they'll like to go try and do things. And if anything, there's a bit of a sibling rivalry for sure, but they'll just, it's, there's no pushing, because they also know that they can do things that we can't. And so they don't try to test it, because the last thing they want to do is have to be dealing with a parent that has to be pulled off the mountain.
Yeah, exactly. Well, like I said, I read your book actually when I was younger, the White Circus. Mm-hmm. So kind of brushed up on the history of the crazy Canucks and whatnot. And you were, to get back to the beginning, actually born in the USA, from what I understand. So how was that like, growing up in the US and then moving to Canada and getting into ski racing?
Yeah, well, the U.S. side, I am what you would call an accidental American. That both my parents, they came from Montreal, and my father was doing postgrad work, his postgrad master's at the University of Michigan when I popped up. So I left the U.S. When I was 2.5, and I don't even have any memories of being in the U.S. So family is entirely Canadian. I actually did renounce my American citizenship several years ago because I have no connections to the U.S. And no family, no financial investments. I've been Canadian my entire life, and so that's that piece is there. I think really the only thing that really comes out of it is a couple of amusing anecdotes. Being at the 1980 Olympics and having someone from the Ann Arbor
Yeah.
Michigan newspaper show up saying we're following locals, and I'm sort of going, well, I'm not really a local. And he says, well, it doesn't matter, you were born here. So,
Right.
but aside from things like that, it was I was always a Canadian through and through, and I'm very proud to have my boys continue to represent the country.
And you grew up racing at Camp Fortune, from what I understand?
Through my father's work, he was a professor of medicine. So he ended up, after he finished his education, he actually hopscotched across the country.
Yeah.
And
in Vancouver for a little while too.
And went to Vancouver, and that's where I started skiing. Was introduced to skiing, let's put it that way, and then joined the formal racing programs with the Ottawa Ski Club at Camp Fortune, which is just it's over on the Quebec side of the Ottawa River.
Mm-hmm.
And then age 12, we moved to Calgary because my father took a position with they were starting the University of Calgary Med School. He was the number 2 employee, and we've ended up staying here ever since. There was an additional attraction to coming back here because actually my mother in 1948 competed in the Canadian Championships
right.
at Banff, which was they used Norquay as the competition venue, and she won the downhill and the combined. So there's always been a link to the Rocky Mountains in the family, lots of family lore. The interesting wrinkle about my mother, with her winning the championship in 1948, is that the first chairlift that we're all familiar with, the North American chair, was built the summer of 1948 and opened December, just after Christmas in 1948. But she won the championship in March of 1948. So they had to walk up. They had to climb the mountain to be able to come down. So that's how you prepared the hill. So they were tough back then.
Yeah.
We always sat back and we're very I guess intimidated, but also sort of in awe of my mom that she'd won the downhill on Norquay, until we realized that in fact they were climbing up the track.
Yeah, that's amazing. She probably was kind of Nancy Green's era, maybe a little before.
No, that's 1948. So Nancy was 20 years later.
Yes, right. I had the dates mixed up there.
Yeah. So
do you think
that was in the year that it was actually that was the Olympic year, the Olympics in St. Moritz that year.
Oh.
And in fact, so part of the reason that we had 2 top skiers, the Rona and Rhoda Wordle. They made up our Olympic team. My aunt was the alternate, and Canada chose not to send the alternate, so she retired, and my mom then won the championship in part because the top 2 skiers weren't there. So it was just the way ski racing was in those days, and they had to they took the train across from Montreal. And they ended up not only, and this is part of the why we were so attracted to this area, is they did the racing in Norquay, and then they went up to Sunshine, skied at Sunshine, went into did the whole tour into Temple Lodge and Skokie Lodge, and we have pictures of my mom up on the peaks and so on, and that's always been treasured memories that we carry around. Every now and then I post stuff like that to Instagram.
That's very cool. There's not many people that have that sort of history of the area. Do you think growing up in Eastern Canada on those icy slopes and whatnot helped your ski racing career when you were younger?
It actually doesn't matter where you come from because, I think, certainly certain parts of the country have reputations. We know what Whistler would be as far as a reputation of tons of snow. Here in Alberta, we tend to get fairly firm conditions, but a mix. But the east, shorter hills and definitely firmer conditions. But at the end of the day, what actually matters is what the quality of the program. And you can see that today, that actually the best represented club on the national ski team today is the Whistler Mountain Ski Club, which you would say, well, World Cup racers are skiing on inverted hockey rinks. The snow's so hard.
Right.
How do those athletes out of Whistler learn to ski on snow so hard? Well,
Yeah.
if they have good training, if they have good coaching, and they learn to love skiing, and that's really the key. You can acquire those skills. You have the fundamental technical skills, and then the coaches help instill the passion, and the passion is what will teach you to acquire the skills. Because in fact, what the athletes are skiing on in World Cup, you can't find anywhere.
Yeah.
And even you, it's challenging to even find it around a World Cup event, to find the surfaces that hard. So it's quite a unique skill.
Right. So it's more about developing passion for the sport and enjoying
Passion for
yourself.
sport. And peer groups. So at the end of the day, you want to. It's in this. Fundamentally, it's a whole lot more fun if you've got 3, 4, 5 people around
Friends.
you. And
Yeah.
I know that personally, because the Crazy Canucks, there were 4 of us, and there were others. So it wasn't just Steve, Dave, and myself. It was Jim Hunter. It was Todd Brooker. It was Rob McLeish. It was Tim Gilhooly. It was a whole number of athletes that we got to train with, kept us honest, made it fun, and a group. And so that holds today when you look at the men's speed group right now, where there's 6 of them that are all in a pack. And they're all the same age. They're a peer group that they have fun with each other.
When you were younger, did you have any inspirations you looked towards, or athletes you looked up to?
When I was younger, well, no question, you always have people. What you're looking for, and what you always hope to have, is people that show you the way. And I think Nancy Green was, of course, very instrumental in our generation, in that she was the #1 female ski racer on the globe, and that indicated to everybody in the whole country that we could be competitive in ski racing. It didn't matter that she was a woman. It was just that it was a Canadian. Someone from your community was able to ski with the best. And the fact she won the first 2 World Cups in 1967 and 1968, and her Olympic gold and silver, those were indicators to everybody that with the right effort and determination and enthusiasm, you could be successful. And beyond that, from time to time, I always looked up to people like Bernard Russi, who I get to work with now on the Alpine Executive Board, who exceptional downhiller, multilingual, very patient, intelligent individual who brings a lot of thought, brought a lot of thought to his ski racing, but also to what he's done in post-competitive. That here he, at the age of 70, is still very, very actively involved, and that's been something that I've always aspired to do. And then you had other people along the way that influenced you. Obviously, Franz Klammer was a peer that you looked to, that he was winning all the races. So you're going, okay, well, I want to do that too. And who better to look to than the person who's being the most successful? So different things like that, both in and out of sport, that you look to say, okay, that's someone I'd like to pattern myself off of. And another person I always single out is Eric Hawker. Not a well-known name, but he, at his time, he was one of the best giant slalom skiers. He's a Norwegian. Won the first run of the giant slalom of the 1972 Olympics in Sapporo, but then had mishap in the second run. And reason why I single him out was when we had when we first broke through in the World Cup. We had a subsequent, our rookie year was not, our second year, our sophomore year was right. Not particularly good. And we then teamed up with the Norwegian team, and Eric was the only leading athlete at the time.
Oh, I read about that.
He really helped us a lot in terms of being a rabbit for us to chase, but also in just his patience with us and being a fully part of the group. And that to me is something that was always really important, because he gave time to us when he didn't have to, and he really helped lift us as a team and learn to be professional ski racers.
Interesting. Did you ever think about playing hockey or choosing another sport, or was ski racing always your main focus?
Skiing was always the main focus. I think I can thank my older sister to be the one who rescued us from hockey, because she's the oldest in our family. And actually, at that time we lived in Kingston.
Right.
We like every Canadian kid, I think, got involved in hockey. I was quite young at the time, but there, of course, was no female hockey, which that was the wrinkle. That how do you have the family keep together if one's not involved and the others are involved? And that, and coupled with the fact that it was a church league, and there was a requirement that you had to be in church on Sunday, and we had to be on the ski hill. That's our church. So so hockey for me, formal hockey for me, lasted not even one season, and then it was we're going to ski. Skiing will be the priority for the family.
It seems like as a Canadian, you're kind of drawn towards hockey no matter what as a youngster, but skiing is probably the best family sport there is. I don't think there's a better one.
I that's no question. I think that's it's always a statement that skiing is the best family sport, because it's equal, gender equal. You know, guys, girls, everybody participates. You don't have to sit in the stands. But that being said, hockey, of course, is it's great for kids. The challenge
opens a lot of doors.
Yeah. The challenge is that because of when hockey starts, especially for younger kids, late August, early September, where they're on the ice and so on, it's kind of hard to drag them out onto the hill in November when already they're hooked into their group, again, the peer group, and they're having fun. And of course, that's what you look to do. But that's where it's, you have to be, as a parent, you have to say, well, you're having fun doing this over here too. And sometimes, people always, it's an interesting challenge. Some people are reluctant to direct their children, but sometimes you need a little subtle nudge. And I think you have to look at it saying, well, skiing and ski racing are family sports versus hockey is not a family sport. And, but sometimes the whole family can get involved, but not in a participation way. Skiing, everybody's skiing, everybody's participating. And so sometimes I think you have to, as a parent, you have to say, well, no, I think we'd rather prioritize that than, skiing than hockey.
Yeah. Did you ever want to be a doctor or go the academic route like your dad?
Well, I did do the academic route, but not a physician, no. Actually, my dad, while being a doctor, he was actually an educator. So he never practiced. He always taught. He always taught at all the various med schools across the country. And as a result of that, actually, my sister was an educator. My brother married an educator. And I tend to think that I follow in a similar vein, but not in a formal way, that my involvement in ski racing has always been to try to be an educator in everything that I've done, and I'm still being involved 40 years after I retired.
Absolutely. So getting to your racing career, I believe you won your first race in 1975 at Val-d'Isère.
That's right.
What was that experience like? Do you remember that feeling?
We do. I think anybody who has gotten to the highest level, you really intimately remember the details, and that's partly why you're able to get to where you get to, is that you have a mind for absorbing the necessary information, and then it stays imprinted for a long time. So I still can eat, breathe, sleep that day. Probably additionally, in that it came as a surprise, and I've always said that it came upon our team so rapidly that we really didn't fully appreciate it, but then it made us very, very hungry for more. And I say surprise in that the leading up to that point in time, as mentioned, we've had plenty of successful female ski racers, but not any successful male ski racers. And I define success as saying that someone getting to a podium. We had people that had gotten quite close. Scotty Henderson had finished fourth in a World Cup. Jim Hunterson had fourth in the World Cup, but nobody had been into the top three or won a race. And there's a pretty big difference between the two, even though it may only be hundredths of a second. So there was always this thing that Canada can produce good female racers, because we had Anne Hegarty, Nancy Green, Lucille Wheeler, Betsy Clifford, all this
a lot of good racers,
succession of successful women, but never any men.
Right.
And but I do know, I can distinctly remember my first World Cup race. Steve Poborski and I were in our inaugural year on the World Cup.
Yep.
And we were in the finish, standing as a team, watching Franz Klammer won the race that day, watching it and going, we can beat these guys. So we had the attitude of just saying, there's not really that much of a difference between them and us. It's just a question of us putting it all together, getting the equipment, preparing ourselves properly, getting the right mindset, and being able to deliver on race day. So the next year we had good preparation. We trained in Zermatt in the autumn through November, good training. Went to Val-d'Isère, and no clear indication that anything was going to be breakthrough, but training had gone well. We usually had 4 or 5 training runs before the race. And then in the race itself, I had number 1, and so came down and put together, a run that I was quite happy with, kind of an unconscious effort. I was young. I was 20 years old.
That's so young.
I still hold I'm third youngest athlete male to win a World Cup downhill.
And you were the first Canadian male to win a title.
First Canadian to win a World Cup male. Always important, male.
Yeah.
The girls always were the standard bearers.
Yeah.
And the only ones that are in fact that were younger than me that have to win a downhill were Franz Klammer, who beat me by about a month, and Herbert Plank, who is actually an Italian who I was in the top 3 that day, who was 19 when he won his first downhill. So I came down number 1, and then Dave Irwin was number 4, and we were sitting 1-2 for the longest time, and then finally we got separated by Bernard Russi and Herbert Plank. But when the dust settled, I was first, Dave was 4th, Steve was 9th, Jim Hunter was 10th, and Dave Murray was 13th. And no one really, the Europeans were going, where did this team come from?
Yeah.
So they were aware of us, but not, again, in winning the race.
Right.
But it wasn't so much, that was a surprise for everybody, including us. But 2 weeks later, Dave Irwin did it again. And we had a similar 5 Canadians in the top 15 in Schladming. And that's when the Europeans were going, okay, this is a legitimacy. And then early in the next year, Dave Irwin almost won the downhill in Wengen. And that's when they said, well, okay, these Canucks, they're something special. But it all built around the fact that the primary rivalry within alpine skiing is between Switzerland and Austria. But there also was a good Italian team, a good German team, and a reasonably good American team at the time, and then other individuals from Norway and so on. And we brought a different element into the competition mix, and that the Europeans really enjoyed. It was new, it was fresh, it was dynamic, and it made it more international. And as a result, then the people they were really enthused, not just by us, but by just everything that was going on within ski racing at that time.
Absolutely. When you started to win races and really started to become a champion, was there a particular skill that set you apart from everybody else? Was it perhaps your reflexes, your strength training, your memory skills?
That's a toughie. When you're at that level, there's not much difference amongst the different competitors. I think I would single out the thing that was different for us, that helped us, was the team, the fact that there was the group of us, again, the peer, and that we worked collaboratively. We knew we had to learn to live together, because we were living with each other continuously for three plus months every winter. So you learn to get along. You realize that you were better off sharing information. And while it seems counterintuitive to the fact that someone would come down and we would, what you do is first person down would radio up to the top with information. So while that seems counterintuitive, that in an individual sport, someone would be sharing information with their teammate that might result in the person coming down behind you to beat you. It's not counterintuitive in the fact that you know that at the next race, the roles may be reversed. And a law of averages means that it's all going to end up coming out on the wash. So it's information sharing. That coupled with the very important fact that we were a team of 4 or 5, and one of the key things of ski racing is going into the World Championships or Olympics, where you're limited to only 4 per nation, whereas the Austrians were 10, the Swiss were 10, and so on. So in their case, they're giving information to someone who might bump them off of a World Championship or an Olympic team, whereas in our group, that wasn't likely to happen. And in my recollection, because if you go into Innsbruck or you go to the Garmisch World Championships and so on, which were the big events of the day, we always only ended up really being able to field 4 athletes. So we didn't have that other additional pressure.
Right.
So we freely shared information, and that was quite unique amongst the European team. So I would say that would be the one thing that singled us, that maybe was a strategic advantage that we had over the European teams.
Was there a particular skill that you had that you'd worked on that you felt that separated yourself from other competitors, no matter who it was?
Not really. We all knew what our strengths were individually, and we knew that the good thing, again, this is where you come back to the value of peer groups, working as strong as a team, that I had a skill set. I was able to really hold speed through high speed turns. So when I say high speed turns, anything from 40 or 80 kilometers an hour up to 120 kilometers an hour. Steve was very, very good in jumps and technically strong. Todd Brooker was a world-class glider. And what you did in training was you're always measuring yourself against your teammate. And you knew your individual strengths. So I knew where I was supposed to be fastest in a training course. And they're broken down into sections. But you would always then be saying, okay, well, I expect to be winning, or at least close to winning where my strengths are. And what my goal is to try to be as close as possible. So, on the flats, that I want to be try as close as possible to Todd or to Dave Irwin. And if I can put all those pieces together, then I'm going to win the race.
Yeah.
And it's having those measurements and the fact that there is then that technical diversity in the team that's going to make the team stronger.
Did you have a certain morning routine that you followed when you were winning all those races? And was there something that stands out for you in that sense?
Religiously. It was
Can you expand on it?
Yeah, no, it was wake up in the morning and run through the course in your head.
Okay.
Like you were racing it, from like seeing it from your perspective through your eyes. Roll out of bed, go for a morning jog, loosen up, some get the circulation going, loosen up the body, have breakfast, relax a bit, then head up approximately 2 hours before training or the race was to happen, to get yourself well prepared, well warmed up. Beyond that, then there were always little idiosyncrasies, but that was the basic routine. And then once you're done, another key piece was whether it was training or race, it became really important that when you cross the finish line, and this is something you had to learn because, you go to Europe and they prepare a track for you and they say, okay, and you're 20, 21, 22, 23 years old, and they say, okay, here's a track for you. Have at it. Like that's the best thing that you could ever offer to a young guy. And so, when people say, well, were you ever scared? No, we were living the dream. This was fantastic to be able to have these tracks fully prepared and secured and available to you. But what you had to do is you had to realize when you crossed the finish line, you didn't just go, yes. You had to stop, reflect on what you had gone through to catch it while it was absolutely crystal clear and fresh. Give yourself 30 minutes or 30 seconds or 60 seconds to really catch it while it was absolutely sharp in your mind, what had been your experience. And then relax and go, okay, because there's of course adrenaline and of course enthusiasm, but those can flush away some of the sharp memories that you need to be successful.
Interesting. How important do you think the mental side of sport is in high level competition?
Well, extremely
90%?
No, 90% is the work. At the end of the day, it's a polishing off, but it's essential.
Okay.
So it's a critical skill that you have to hone. But at the end of the day, you have to invest the time. You have to invest the hours in terms of your preparation. And so there's no shortcuts. There's no point. I think people would say, well, it's 90% mental. At the very, very end, when you're in the start gate, no question. But that's forgetting the fact that you've invested how many hundreds of hours of preparation to get you to that point in the start gate.
Speaking of investment, what do you think your best investment was in terms of training or equipment or time? Does anything stand out in that process for you?
I would say it's not that useful to share because it would be retrospective of what worked for us, and what they do today is quite different than what we did. I look at what the boys do now, and I kind of go, I wish we knew that then.
Really?
They have the good fortune of working with world-class service providers, whether it's conditioning trainers or psychologists or nutritionists, and so they're instructed and learn many of those skills quickly, rather than we didn't have those access to those people, and so you learn essentially by trial and error.
Yeah.
Especially in terms of how to win, the psychology of how to win, and so that's something that I would certainly. It was a great experience to be able to go through that, but today's system, where through the Canadian Sports Center, or the Canadian Sport Institute up at Canada Olympic Park, and there are others across the country, they get access to people that can help them frame them much more quickly, and that's a much better way to do it. They train smarter. They prepare much more smarter.
Do you think it may have been a competitive advantage for you in a sense? The Crazy Canucks kind of just came out of nowhere, didn't really have this huge apparatus behind you. Maybe that helped.
It taught you to be self-reliant, for sure, and from time to time that would be helpful. But I would say on the whole, it was actually it was a hurdle that actually had to be overcome.
Really?
Because we were, even then the Austrian and Swiss and German and Italian teams were and French teams were well financed.
Yeah.
And so we in fact were always playing catch up to them. There was a point in time where we were very close, but even still. While talent can trump everything, at the end of the day, having the resources to build competitive teams is how you build the strong program, and they had more resources to be able to build those competitive teams. So it's one of the reasons why you see the waves in the Canadian program, where we have success, and then all of a sudden we seem to have a trough. Whereas the Austrians seem to always have somebody waiting in the wings to step in. It's usually comes back to resources, and money. Money will help create successful programs if they're wisely led.
Do you think it's kind of the chicken and the egg sort of thing, where if you get a group of winning athletes, the money starts to flow in, or do you need the money first to get a winning group, or is it kind of parallel to each other?
Well, having resources and funding always is helpful, but often you do have to build success with fairly meager resources, and that's not unusual. The good thing is that it is possible. We demonstrated it. The current team demonstrates it as well. That things are not flush at the moment within Canadian ski racing, and yet we're still. Currently, when you look at the team, we had some of the best success in men's tech we've had in the last decade, and our men's speed group. We are coming with one of the most promising young groups that we've had in a long time, and in fact, most of the other teams are looking at our team with the group that they're very, very young. They're in their early 20s, and they're one of the strongest young teams on the World Cup circuit right now. But what they lack having leaders to pull them along, which just makes it that much more difficult. But if they keep working at it and working as a group, they're going to find that they will be successful. So all of those are examples of how you can build success out of minimal resources. The good thing I would say is that within the Canadian system, now there's a firm belief that we can build competitive teams, and people want to have competitive teams. And I think once you then get success, so I've said many times, the best thing that we could do in terms of marketing our sport is to get somebody on top of the podium, and then that'll build the flywheel of success from there. But the Canadian system, and this coming back to that, there's a tremendous amount of goodwill right across the country.
Right.
People want to help our athletes succeed, and they are willing to step up and help the individuals. And hopefully now there's some good leadership ahead of both administratively and technically within Alpine Canada. I think that I see the pathway forward for this current group to be much better than it's been for quite some time.
If there was, say, $100 million deposited in Alpine Canada's bank account tomorrow, do you think there would be a direct correlation in results in the next 3, 4, 5 years?
Well, there would be, no question. Money is critically important. The thing is that there's not going to be $100 million dropped in. It's gonna take a lot of hard work, and that's okay. I mean, it's as long as people recognize that it's going to take hard work, and they have to roll their sleeves up and bear down and do what they need to do to try to help the athletes be successful. We will produce successful athletes. Mm-hmm. There's often a challenge, and in fact, one of the challenges that the Canadian sports system has had to grapple with is since actually leading up to the 2010 Olympics, with Own the Podium and the additional funding, that sometimes having too much money is not necessarily a good thing.
Right. Exactly.
You end up looking for ways to spend money. So it's a tricky balance of how do you keep people hungry and focused and really drilling down in terms of what you need to do to build successful programs, while not falling into complacency. Yeah, the money's there, and we just we'll bring it in. So you need to always have a certain level of hunger in there. And when I say hunger, meaning that you're hungering for success. You're driven for success. Because at the end of the day, that drive is the critical key of building strong programs. Drive and passion, and you can't become complacent. You can't just accept that the money's there, it's okay. Because often then you miss the details, and in the end, detail is what makes the difference between success and failure.
Absolutely. Getting back to your career a bit, I think you won the Kitzbühel downhill for the first time in 1980, was it?
That's correct. Yep.
So what was that day like?
Well, it was
for people, anyone listening, the Kitzbühel downhill is the Super Bowl of all downhills and all ski races in the circuit. It's the premier title probably to win, I think.
Yeah. It was unique in a couple of ways. That year we I had always I had some of my initial early success as a young athlete. So first year on the World Cup, that was actually I'll call it my breakthrough result, where in the first year there I finished 18th, and so I had always known that Kitzbühel was the toughest downhill. It's the one that probably fit the most with the kind of ski racing that I like to do. But I'd had little mistakes, and things had not quite worked out. So going into 1980, I think 8th was the best result that I'd had at Kitzbühel. And I was a bit puzzled as to why it just never seemed to come together on race day. So the story starts where we were training on the Hittertux Glacier, which is about an hour and a half away from Kitzbühel, and we had a day where we were snowed out. And Steve and I actually said, well, what are we going to do? We can sit around drinking coffee, or we can jump in a car, and why don't we drive down to Kitzbühel and hike the downhill, which is what we did. And then a couple of weeks later, we had another incident where the weather was, the glacier was weathered out. So we went back again, and that time we went back with a different group that actually included my future wife and Todd Brooker. And so we hiked the downhill twice, and in hiking it made me, it did open my eyes a little bit into, there were parts of the track that I hadn't realized exactly where they were. So the sidelom is one that really stood out, and the importance of the sidelom is that it's a gas off that is just off the side of the track. Yeah. Its history is that Hansi Hinterseer, who is one of the top Austrian slalom skiers of the day, grew up there with his grandmother. But it's also where the World Cup was founded in 1966. The bigwigs of the time, Serge Lang and company, had a bad day, and while the race was going on, and they gathered there for an evening, and they discussed the future of the World Cup and came up with the concept of a World Cup.
Wow.
And
it's a lot of history.
Yeah, and so it suddenly realized where it was, and that, and subtleties of the track, and different things that gave me a much greater appreciation of the lay of the land. And I also knew walking up a downhill was going to be something that was going to help. Just, you get your head into it, and you really gather in the ambience of the location and so on.
So you did that before.
So we did that before. We came back race day or the race week, and we had good conditions, but the season had not gone that well for us that year. Just mishaps, crashes, things that just weren't clicking for us. So we hadn't had any good results up to that point in time in the season. And going into the race, then there was a little bit of intrigue in that there was one of the technicians had tried to use some special wax, and they'd done that earlier in the season, and it hadn't worked out. It was a disaster, and they came back and tried to do it again. But this time they wisely, our serviceman wisely went to the coaches and said, "What do I do?" And the coaches said, "We'll take care of it. You just prepare appropriately." And of the day, our serviceman, who was an Austrian but working with the Canadian team, and he had his bench right with the Austrian serviceman. So that's how closely we were working together. Then race day, everything came together as far as the race. I ended up winning, and Hardy Weirathar, who was a young up-and-coming Austrian racer, came second. So the two servicemen had, were working together, and they were 1-2. Dave Irwin had a breakthrough result. I think he came fifth in the race. So to have it all come together, that plan of the preparation, the knowledge of the hill, the team working together, the getting the, and then being able to get into the start gate and actually deliver on demand what you needed to do. And I won by I think 3/4 of a second, which was a fairly significant margin.
That's pretty good. Yeah.
I didn't really fully appreciate though what that fully meant though, until I did subsequently learn that that I joined because I didn't realize that no North American had won the downhill in the World Cup era. But this past year, it was the 40th anniversary, and I was invited back as the Legend of Honor for that's cool. The 2000 Hahnenkamm, where you realized how much there's then this deep appreciation in Austria, towards ski racing and towards the history of the sport, and that's something that remains that no one's ever going to be able to take away from you. And you have your gondola riding up and down with your name on it.
That's so cool.
Until such time as they decide that they're going to have the 1980s decade and put us all on one gondola.
Yeah.
We'll be, another 20 or 30 years on.
Like the Stanley Cup sort of thing. There's only so many rings. Did you spend the night in the Londoner pub that night? I think isn't that the tradition when you win?
Well, the Londoner party was going at that point in time. That was actually the kickoff to it. It was.
Didn't you start that tradition or something?
Well, Conrad Bartelski, who was he skied for the British ski team, and he went to Rick Gunnell, who is the owner of the Londoner, and said, "Why don't you do a challenge that if there's any English-speaking athlete wins the race, free champagne?" And
That's cool.
And Rick went, "Sure." And so this young Canadian wins the race. I actually missed all the free champagne because there's all sorts of different things going on. It's a big social and commercial weekend for skiing,
Right.
for the ski industry. And the fact that I won the race, Fisher they were dragging me all over the place, the Fisher ski manufacturers, and I didn't get there until about midnight. And by then, all of my teammates and competitors had consumed all the champagne. So
okay. Well, I'm
party
sure there
was almost over.
Yeah, almost. I'm sure there was quite a bit left over for you guys. Was it? You weren't really known for staying out late, but I'm sure you're out late that night.
I wasn't, and I actually didn't stay. You know, it was by then party's over, time to go home.
Fair enough. That's sounds fun. But
the only time I really enjoyed the Londoner was, I think, about 3 years later.
Cool. What?
Because I wasn't a winner in that race. I was in the top 3, but I wasn't a winner. The winners get dragged everywhere. They're on a whole different program.
Right. That's cool. But you guys were the first ones to start the Londoner?
Well, that started the party, and then we had so Steve Poborski won the next 2 years, and then Todd Brooker won the fourth year, and that really entrenched it for that, because Rick honored that pledge of free champagne for the next 4 years, and then it's carried on ever since.
That's really cool. Speaking of equipment, there's a lot of debate on equipment in ski racing or any sport. How important do you think equipment is to a top racer's performance? Is it the most important thing, or what are your thoughts on that?
You can't win without good equipment. So it's you have to, as mentioned before, you have to invest your time in your preparation.
Everyone worries about having the best skis, for instance.
Yes. So it's a combination of your physical preparation, your mental preparation, and part and parcel of doing both is working with your ski technician and the ski company to get a proper setup. And the setup takes hours and hours. So that's part of the many runs, the many hours on glaciers and through the fall, of developing, not only honing skill, so your technique, but also your setup, which is part of technique. And so working with getting the best equipment that's matched to you, getting your right setup, because you've got your canting, your side canting, your fore aft, getting your proper boots set up. And it's the kind of thing that's extremely tricky. It takes, and it's a lot of it's just done through straight trial and error, feel. And that's where the ski companies highly value athletes that can provide really good feedback. So you do see a lot of the top athletes. That's one of the reasons why they are top, is because they can jump on a pair of skis and they can really feel what's working, what's not working, and then they can articulate that to the serviceman, who then either changes preparation or can go back to the factory to say, we need to consider something in terms of the design of the ski. And then once you get your setup, then you can stick with it. But to give you the idea of how tricky it can be, Marcel Hirscher, number one ski racer, male ski racer in slalom and giant slalom of all time, with the
He's actually my age.
The Austrian ski team, anatomic, at the Olympics in Pyeongchang, where they had unusual snow conditions, because they had this very, very, very dry, hard, cold crystal snow that was influenced by Siberia. So very different than what you would find in Europe. They were having real difficulty figuring out what was the right setup. And Marcel struggled in the slalom. So that's just, it's an indication of just how challenging that can be, even with tremendous resources. Yet, but on the other hand, then when it works, and that's one of the advantages that Hirscher had, was he had such enormous resources behind him. That's why he became so successful. But he also invested the time in terms of he was probably the fittest athlete on the hill. And he had a tremendous ability to be able to communicate of what worked and what didn't. And so that's what the athletes do. They when you're, when sometimes people wonder why they need to have all this time on the snow in the spring and in the summer and then into the fall. It's they're constantly working with the equipment to make sure that, and it's just a very, very, very a trial and error effort that takes hours and hours and hours.
When I raced, I ended up racing till I was about 18 or so, and there was always a rumor that the top ski companies would kind of save the best skis for like the stars of the day, maybe Herman Meyer or something like that. Was there truth behind that rumor? Is that
there's always pecking order.
Is there?
Always, yeah,
that's
the
true.
Best, the best get the best and goes down. That's understandable. You see that in anything, Formula One, anything that that the very best, they earn it, and they often have the strongest team behind them. But it's when fortunately ski racing is an international market. So and when I talk about the differences between different athletes from different countries, they are interested in having successful athletes from different countries. But clearly, when you sit down and you go, okay, so who gets first choice? Well, if it's an Austrian ski company, there's a good chance that they're going to prioritize the Austrians first. But quite often, the Austrians are amongst the top group. But when you talk about the differences between, say, the top Austrian, the top Swiss, the top Italian, the top Canadian, top American, they're very, 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 very minor differences. There's much more to it in terms of the setup and how you're working with your setup.
When you were winning all your races in the 80s and 70s, did you hold a belief or a kind of a counterintuitive idea that other people may have thought was a bit crazier that kind of gave you an edge or anything along those lines?
Possibly, but at the end,
nothing stands out.
No, nothing that stands out. So
it seems sometimes there's a kind of a athlete that breaks out. They have a counterintuitive thought or way of training, but it seems like it was more just a collaborative effort with the Crazy Canucks and
collaborative effort, and what would happen from time to time is people would take a different approach, and that's how sport evolves. That people will come forward with something different, but that's it's a slow evolution as opposed to a revolution. So and I think there's things where I would say more of this, that you have your eureka moments where you go, okay, that worked. Okay, so if that and that's the trial and error of particularly of how you prepare yourself, that you do something and you have a good result, and so you're reinforced to continue to do the things that work for you, and you stop doing other things. But every now and then you realize that I'll use one big example. We did a tremendous amount of running when as part of our physical preparation, far more than we needed to do.
Really?
I was able to run a sub 5 minute mile.
Right.
But you're going, well, why? Did that make you a better ski racer? And the answer is no, it didn't. It wasn't necessary. It was, just because of the volume of time that you put in to try to have your capacity to be able to run that fast. At the end of the day, did it really truly help your ski racing? Yes, you were fit, but it was overboard. So and it would have been great to have had someone who'd said why, challenged and said why are you putting so much time into there? And and those kinds of experts, you always want to have them around, people that are going to give you a good critical review.
You retired when you were relatively young for an athlete in ski racing. I think you were 27 at the time.
Yep.
Do you think if you'd grown up in this era of ski racing, you would have kept going for another 10 years or so, or were you just done?
It's all the context of the times. So I came into the sport very early, much earlier than many, and although that was not that unusual at that time, and also at the time people retired in their late 20s. It was actually a rarity to have someone go into their 30s, whereas today especially in speed, you have to gain the experience. It takes you time to get that. So it's now the time of breakthrough, where athletes are typically now coming into the top 3 are in the mid-20s, where they're mid-20s, whereas in my era it was actually in your early 20s. And now there's a realization that with the kind of financial support and the training support that you have, and the fact that the world is much smaller. Now it's no big deal to communicate. Email, text, social media. You're able to keep in close contact with people at home, whereas you go back 40 years ago, it was very difficult and expensive to communicate with people, and so as a result, you're much more comfortable. The world has become, seems like a minor point, but you go into any hotel room in Austria now, you're going to have a TV in the room. Well, 40 years ago, you didn't. There was one TV in the whole hotel.
Wow.
It just was not common. And little things like that make life, a little easier. So as a result, people then are able to see that they can stay longer. So you have Eric Gay, who just retired a year ago, and he stayed with the Canadian team, I think, for 14 or 15 years. You have Hannes Reichelt with the Austrian ski team, who just celebrated his 40th birthday.
Yeah, that's amazing.
And he was on a podium last year. So you're going. Athletes realize that age is no longer a barrier. That they can in fact continue to get better well into their 30s.
In 1980, I think that was the event where you lost your ski. There was
the Olympics, yeah.
So that may have been one of your quote unquote failures. Do you think you had, or was there a failure along the way that maybe helped you or set you up for success later? Do you think some of those failures helped you in a way?
Well, it teaches you to deal with adversity. I think I learned that you have to deal with adversity, and there's no point in dealing with adversity in an overt way. Stuff happens. Yes, my ski came off. It's not that unusual for that to happen. You don't want it to happen. Nobody wants it to happen, but it does. Unfortunately, happened at the wrong time. You pick yourself up and you learn from that. And I didn't react. I of course was furious with what happened, but that's not going to change anything. So you just look at it, you try to learn from that and move on.
Thinking back, do you have any failures that you may have actually learned something or been a silver lining for you in life or in your career?
Oh, I'm sure, but we don't need to dwell on that.
Nothing stands out.
We're focused on the successes.
Okay. Sometimes you're supposed to, invert your thinking and think about the things that went wrong, but nothing stands out, I guess. So you retired when you were pretty young, but you still had a lot of healthy years left in, your athletic career. Did you find that there was a bit of a gap in life after the World Cup and racing and whatnot?
There's always the challenge, when you've been so engaged into something that you have to refocus and find new passions, and so retirement is not an easy thing. Often an athlete does need to find what is their new passion, the thing that really will capture their attention. And I believe I was fortunate to do that in running my own business. I got very involved with. I was a member of the ILC Athletes Commission. Athlete representation became a big focus of my life. In addition to, and then I was hired by CBC to be a commentator. Worked for them for 14 years, which is a pretty long stretch. So all those were great experiences and allowed me to be able to refocus. Got involved with, we ran a charity ran charitable events supporting the Canadian Cystic Fibrosis Foundation, and we raised nearly $3 million for cystic fibrosis research to help with their research projects and so on. So all of these different things were new avenues, new conduits to be able to channel your passion, channel your intellectual capacities, and to try to build new platforms. And to me, that's what it always is each one of these are just platforms that you can you experience, you learn, and you try to use them to leap to a higher platform or a different one to be able to gain other experiences.
Do you keep up with people like Franz Klammer or some of those old stars, and you guys still talk? That's amazing.
Ski community is pretty small. It's, we keep in, not necessarily intimately in touch, but, we see each other usually, maybe 1 or 2 times per year.
That's so cool.
Whether it's within ski circles, either at the within the International Ski Federation or at ski events. Last year there were 2 big anniversaries. The Lauberhorn was celebrating its 90th anniversary, and the Hahnenkamm the 80th, and so they brought back a lot of the former winners. And they were very different because the Lauberhorn being in Switzerland, it was very Swiss focused, and the Hahnenkamm being in Austria, it was very Austrian focused, but there were good international crowds at both of them. And so, a lot of the people that, many of them, because it was covering the whole spectrum. And so you were able to actually, I met a number of the older winners that I had never met before, got to know them quite well. And in fact, last year, one of the best memories I had is a group of us went skiing before the race in Wengen. And you had Karl Alpiger, you had, I'd have to go back and think of the group of different people that were from Switzerland, from Italy, from Germany, Marcus Vossmeyer from Germany, myself, Kyle Rasmussen was American. And, and a group of us just out having a good fun ski and, blasting off down the hill, and people from the age of 80 down to 40 out having a good time.
Jean-Claude Keely,
appreciating the and actually Patrick Roussel was one of the honored athletes. He was a top French ski racer before my time in the World Cup. I had never met Patrick before this year. We were able to hang out together. And then in fact, his wife said, "Oh, you're going to be in Kitzbühel. Phew, there's going to be somebody there we know." So, because he was off to, things like that are really nice little exchanges you have, and being able to have memories. And, and I was able to say to Patrick, when I was really, really young, I skied in Hessian boots because of you. He was the guy who introduced this particular type of French boot brand. And I was very influenced at the time by him.
That's really cool. Do you ever I talked to Manny about this, Herman Meyer. Do you know him or keep up with him?
I know Herman. He's not. He came, of course, subsequent. He was 1990s,
a little younger,
into the early 2000s, and so certainly know who he is. We've interviewed him, but I wouldn't say I know Herman that well. Whereas Manny would have raced with him.
I asked because he was so dominant for half dozen years, and then nothing.
Yeah, and it tends to be where your connections are, because Stefan Eberharder was his main competitor within the Austrian team. Yeah. Stefan I actually know fairly well, but cool. Herman I don't. So just some people you connect with. And
absolutely. Well, I won't take too much more of your time. I really appreciate it. I guess to kind of wrap things up here, maybe a couple more questions. If you were to give advice to your 30-year-old self, what would you tell him now?
Listen to your coaches. Same thing. Listen closely to your coaches.
Okay. To invert that, you're always supposed to invert your thinking. What's the worst advice you hear people given when they're young in their careers or in general?
The worst advice I hear is that people saying that they feel that there's this year's really important. You've got to deliver this year, and if you don't, then it's your career's over. They're not thinking the long game, because they're not taking into consideration what might be going on. You might be having an equipment problem. You might have hurt yourself. You have things that may be influencing your ability to perform. It's never a definitive end. That's a false. So it's really more for younger athletes who are climbing the ladder and who are going, okay, well, if I don't have the performance that I need this year, if I don't make that team, my career is over. No, if you believe in the talent, you have the talent, and if you have the will, the passion, this year is never the last year. You always have to be playing a long game.
Well, that's great. I think that's a really good spot to leave it.
Yeah, so it's a pleasure, Trevor. Yeah.
I really appreciate you taking the time, and maybe I'll see you on the slopes one day.
Hopefully we do. Let's hope that everything's, we have to be working towards a full ski season this year. So both competitively, so that we have our athletes racing, and also for our own enjoyment, that we get out there and enjoy. We may have to change the way in which we approach getting out onto the slope, but I think if we're all smart enough to know that what we need to do, we have to do, because at the end of the end, we're willing to make those little sacrifices to be able to get out and do what we love to do.
Well, I think that's a great place to leave it. So thank you. Thanks, Ken.
Pleasure.
I'll leave it there. One sec here. I'll just, okay, that's it. So
hopefully the boys in the background didn't create too much noise.